Good morning. I'd like to wish you a happy whatever holidays you happen to be celebrating.
Solstice.
Solstice, yes. If you happen to be in the northern hemisphere, which looks like most of you are, it is solstice today. So, this is Sunday Assembly. We're going to have a great event today, and I think the next thing we're going to be doing is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer sing-along.
We thought it'd be fun to sing a lot of the secular Christmas carols that everyone enjoys every single year. So we'll do some of the oldies but goodies. Can we come up here? Yeah, we got everybody? Ready?
You know Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid, Donner and Vixen. But do you recall the most famous reindeer of all? Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, reindeer, had a very shiny nose. Lights fall. You never saw him, but he could say all the other reindeer, so I can call him names. They never run for Rudolph, joining in the reindeer game. Then one morning, Christmas Eve, Santa came and said,
Ho, ho, ho!
Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? Then all the reindeer loved him as they shouted out with glee. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, you'll go down in history. As they shouted out with glee, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, you'll go down in history. You'll go down in history.
Nice. Good job. Christmas needs more ukulele and kazoos. Yeah, let's do that thing. I need a pick though. Ready? Aha. I got it. Have a holly jolly Christmas. It's the best time of the year. Have a hope that we know that Rudolph's here. Have a holly jolly Christmas. One down the street. They have all the friends you know, everyone you meet. Oh, the mistletoe, the way you can see. Somebody waits for you, it's good for me. Have a holly jolly Christmas, and meet you in here. Oh my God, have a holly jolly Christmas is here. Oh, how the mistletoe, where you can see. Somebody waits for you, it's good for me. Have a holly jolly Christmas, and kiss you didn't hear. Oh my God, oh my God, this time jolly, have a holly jolly Christmas. And another one. Can you tell? We had 1 week to rehearse. We normally spend all month. Yeah, let's put together some pop songs. And I said, we have 1 week. Oh, holly jolly Christmas. Thanks, everybody. Good job.
All right, let's hear it for the band. I think the sing-along helps us all realize how difficult that can be, right? By the way, since it is the holidays, we were going to be ordering pizza, hanging out a little bit afterwards. Could we get a quick show of hands who might be interested in staying afterwards, having some pizza, chatting a little while? Okay, that'll help us figure out how many slices and so forth. Hi.
10, 12.
All right.
12 people.
Okay. Next up, we will be having our reading by Vivien Castillo, who will be reading an excerpt from a celebration of winter solstice.
Alright, yeah, because today is the solstice, I thought I'd read an excerpt about it. There is a tendency to want to hurry from autumn to spring to avoid the long, dark days that winter brings. Many people do not like the constant days, the threat of light, and months filled with colder temperatures. They struggle with the bleakness of the land and emptiness of the trees. Their eyes and hearts seek color. Their spirits tire of chasing the endless gray skies. There is great rejoicing in the thought that light and warmth will soon be filling more and more of each new day. But winter darkness has a positive side to it. As we gather to celebrate the first turn from winter to spring, we are invited to recognize the honor and beauty in the often unwanted season of winter. Let us invite our hearts to be glad for the courage winter proclaims. Let us be grateful for the wisdom winter brings in teaching us about the need for withdrawal as an essential part of renewal. Let us also encourage our spirits as earth prepares to come forth from this time of withdrawal into a season filled with light. The winter solstice celebrates the return of hope to our land as our planet experiences the first slow turn towards greater daylight. Soon we'll welcome the return of the sun and the upcoming of springtime. As we do so, let us remember and embrace the positive enriching aspects of winter's darkness. Let this darkness be a safe enclosure of creative gestation for you.
Next, Mike May, Board of Directors member and our dashing photographer, will be talking about why Sunday Assembly.
Hello everyone, my name is Mike, and as you may know, I am a new member on the Board of Directors of Sunday Assembly. I would like to talk to you today about what I really value in a community like Sunday Assembly. Of course, I have a personal story about growing up in a marginally religious family, losing my religion, and navigating my way through high school and college as an outspoken non-believer. This is probably a story you've all heard and are very sympathetic to. But today, I'm going to change it up a bit and talk about the vision I have for Sunday Assembly and any kind of secular congregational organization that may form in the future. I'll put it like this. We live a very short life, and we only have one shot at it. That means the little time we have here is incredibly rare and incredibly important. From this viewpoint, it is our responsibility to participate in society, to take part in civic life, to use our time in service of higher ideals, to fulfill our individual roles in a democratic society. I think one of the greatest obstacles to civic engagement and social action is indifference. I see it all the time. I live in Chicago. I graduated from a top university, and my cohort consists of the best and brightest in terms of academics and professional success. The vast majority of my peers are not creationists or Bible-thumping conservatives, and the majority don't even believe in anything supernatural. Many of them find great jobs and start wonderful and engaging careers in the professional world. But how many of them actively volunteer or help often? How many of them vote, engage in public debates, learn about the social choices and public policy that shape our world, also weaken in the future, live better? How many marvel at the universe, advocate for basic funding in science, promote education as a public good, or develop their curiosity to learn more and wonder more? The social responsibilities that we have often are taken for granted. Some surveys show that religious people often vote more, volunteer more, give to charity more, even when you account for so-called religious charities. I think this is not a condemnation of secularism or non-belief. It is instead a deep challenge to build the types of social structures that encourage and promote civic, moral, and intellectual engagement with the wider world. There is another aspect of Sunday Assembly that I deeply value. It's very simple, and I wish people would say it more. I simply enjoy the experience. Independent of the external utilitarian consequences or theological implications of any particular congregational activity, the fact is I like singing songs and I like feeling what Durkheim called collective effervescence. It's a feeling of a momentary loss of individuality and an affiliation with something much greater than yourself. While I do not agree with many of Durkheim's views, especially his very broad definition of what religion is, he thinks every type of social organization is basically religious, I do think there is great value in pursuing experiences that we find enjoyable and enrich and even transform our lives. I hope I've given you a small perspective into why I love Sunday Assembly. If you want to talk to me privately, I'll be available. Thanks for listening.
Let's see here. Of course, it's the Chicago grad that is quoting philosophers and theologians in his Why Sunday Assembly. So, millions of Americans are celebrating a birthday come Christmas time. Did you guys know that we're celebrating a birthday too? This is the 1-year anniversary of Sunday Assembly in Chicago. Yeah. 1 year ago, December, I don't remember what day it was, Hemant Mehta come and spoke. We had Sanderson and Pippa, who founded Sunday Assembly in the UK, come and they did a tour through the US, and that's what founded Sunday Assembly, and we've been going ever since. Here at Murphy Elementary School, or here over about the last 6 months. It's been a lot of fun. We've been learning a lot every single month about how to do this well. This is really our ongoing experiment into building sort of a secular alternative to church, but really being good for its own sake. Which is why I celebrate lots of Christmas traditions just because I like them. If Christmas didn't exist, I think it's a great thing to invent. A gift-giving time of the year. For a long time, obviously, the solstice has been a big holiday. From now on, all the days are getting longer, and we can celebrate the rebirth of the year. Christmas trees are great. Presents are great. I love Christmas carols. Obviously, let's see if we can get this on here. And this song's a little bit about that. Obviously, family is one of the most important parts of the holiday season. This is a song by Tim Minchin, some of you may have heard of. If you haven't, spend all day on YouTube watching Tim Minchin. I really like Christmas. It's sentimental, I know, but I just really like it. I'm hardly religious. I'd rather break bread with Dawkins than Desmond to be honest. And yes, I have all of the usual objections to consumerism, to commercialization of an ancient religion, to the westernization of a dead Palestinian press gang into selling PlayStations and beer. But I still really like it. I'm looking forward to Christmas, though I'm not expecting a visit from Jesus. I'll be seeing my dad. My brother and sisters, my gran and my mom, they'll be drinking white wine in the sun. I'll be seeing my dad. My brother and sisters, my gran and my mom, they'll be drinking white wine in the sun. I don't go in for ancient wisdom. I don't believe just because ideas are tenacious, it means that they're worthy. I get freaked out by churches. Some of the hymns that they sing have nice chords, but the lyrics are dodgy. And yes, I have all of the usual objections to the miseducation of children who in tax-exempt institutions are taught to externalize blame and to feel ashamed and to judge things as plain right or wrong. But I quite like the song. I'm not expecting big presents. The old combination of socks, jocks, and chocolates is just fine by me. 'Cause I'll be seeing my dad, my brother and sisters, my gran and my mom. They'll be drinking white wine in the sun. I'll be seeing my dad, my brother and sisters, my gran and my mom. They'll be drinking white wine in the sun. You, my baby girl, my jet-lagged infant daughter, you'll be handed round the room like a puppy at a primary school, and you won't understand. You will learn someday that wherever you are and whatever you face, these are the people who make you feel safe in this world. My sweet blue-eyed girl. And if my baby girl, when you're 21 or 31, and Christmas comes around, and you find yourself 9,000 miles from home, you'll know whatever comes. Your brother and sisters and me and your mom will be drinking white wine in the sun. Whenever you come, your brothers and sisters, your aunts and your uncles, your grandparents, cousins, and me and your mom will be drinking white wine in the sun, drinking white wine in the sun. Darling, when Christmas comes, we'll be waiting for you in the sun, waiting for you. Waiting. I really like Christmas. It's sentimental, I know. Hopefully we can fix the piano in post. Oh, there we go. Now we can hear. Thanks, everybody.
Our featured speaker for today is Rabbi Adam Chalom, who's speaking on Imagine There's No Heaven, a humanist approach to memory and memorial. Adam Chalom was raised as a humanist and humanistic Jew in suburban Detroit at the Birmingham Temple, the world's first congregation of humanistic Judaism. Rabbi Chalom is on the advisory council of the Humanist Institute and serves as both the rabbi of Kol Hadash Humanistic Congregation in the Chicago North Suburbs and as dean for North America of the IISHJ. He lives in Highland Park with his wife and 2 children. Related to this morning topic, Rabbi Chalom is also a humanist celebrant who has officiated at over 75 funerals and memorial celebrations of life.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here. I normally am not able to come on Sunday mornings because my congregation runs Sunday school, and there's an old saying that the same tush can't dance at 2 weddings, so I couldn't be here and there. I'm glad it worked out to be able to be here today, and I will wish you a happy Hanukkah no matter what you say.
Happy Hanukkah.
A few years ago, I received an email around this time of year And I want to read to you the text of that email. Subject, my funeral. Dear Rabbi Shalom, I found you much too late in my life. For most of my life, I am now 38, I have been an atheist with a strong and positive Jewish identity. Had I known that congregations like Kol Hadash existed, I would have happily involved myself in my family, my lovely wife, and my young daughters. And while my wife and children may in the future seek to involve themselves with Kol Hadash, my future is very short. I am dying of cancer. My oncologist predicts I have 3 to 4 months left to live. That may not be a lot of time to live, but it is a decent amount of time to plan a funeral, and that is what prompts me to contact you. Part 1 and 1 is the rabbi part, with a few parts spoken by people I highly trust. Ideally, these themes get across. There is no reason to be afraid or sad for the dead person. A dead person feels no pain, no sadness, no loss, no grief, no fear. A dead person is at peace. We need not pretend that the dead person is in heaven looking down on us. That's just an imaginary attempt to deny death in the first place. And there is no need, because the dead person is just fine. Quintessential peace. What about those who suffer the loss but remain alive? A wife without a husband? Children without their father? Friends without a friend? Unlike the dead person, these people feel a huge amount of pain. What can they do to feel less pain, less loss? One thing they can do is try to invent an imaginary heaven where the lost person lives. This is, again, nothing more than an attempt to pretend that the death never happened, and the heart won't fall for it. The real way to coping with the loss of a loved one does not eliminate the pain, but puts the pain to work. The more we remember the person we have lost, the more we come to know that he or she has become part of who we are. The more we connect with others who have loved the person we have lost, the more we can share memories, both funny and sad, the more we learn that our grief connects us to the world. And as we meet more and more people who have lost loved ones, but who are strong and, on the whole, more confident, we can become. Over that time, we can become more confident, whole, strong, and compassionate. That's part of the work our pain does. It makes us more compassionate toward the sufferings of others. This is just a brief outline of the ideas I hope to get across. I hope also that the rabbi could add many more ideas from humanist Judaism, maybe a few humanist prayers, rituals, and I hope most of all that you would be willing to be the rabbi mentioned above, the one who officiates the funeral. Rabbi Shalom, please say yes. What was I going to say? He wrote half of my sermon. I didn't even have to do it. It was exactly my approach. I might have been a little softer on the imaginary world at the context of a funeral eulogy, but I realized that this would be a very difficult experience for me as well. Here's someone in his 30s with 2 small children and a young spouse looking forward to a long life together and facing a sentence of death. Here I was in my 30s with 2 young children and a spouse. This was mortality in the mirror. And I told the family when I met with them, I'm going to try not to work out my issues on you. But understand that to some extent this is my life, and this is my death that I'm grappling with as I go through this process. Now there's a well-known saying out there that I haven't been able to track down the origin of. Humanists believe in life before death. The concept is that if this is our only life, we should live while we are here. We want to celebrate the here and the now, and we do not fear what is beyond because we were not before. This goes back to the Greek philosopher Epicurus, who says, I do not fear death because as I was not before, I will not be then, and there's nothing to fear, just as Alex, who wrote me this email, expressed it in his own words. But we also have to acknowledge reality. The reality is that our own mortality, our own innate fear of death, or at least nervousness or squeamishness about death, the loss of those we love, and our emotional pain at that, our own emotional needs to say goodbye, to remember others and to be remembered by others, our need to find comfort after a death. Well, we can't just say, suck it up rationally. If we're going to be humanists, we have to meet these human needs. Working with families on funerals and memorials is some of the most rewarding and the most challenging work that I get to do. Because we're dealing with death, we're dealing with eulogies, we're dealing with people at a very raw moment in their lives. It's a very compressed time frame. I get the call that someone has died. In fact, this particular email, I was at IKEA picking up kids' beds, and I get the call on my cell phone that this person has passed away. So then I have to schedule meeting with the family, schedule when the service is going to be, actually go to meet with the family, then find time to write the eulogy, lead the service. Often there's an interment at the cemetery afterwards, and maybe visiting the family in the weeks that follow. I'm very gratified when the work is well received, because helping people is one of the reasons I get into the work that I do. Why I feel like a humanist, I help people. When I feel like I'm doing my job, I'm helping people. But I often gain more than I give, because I'm privileged to be in that room with the intimate family, the closest friends, reflecting on the life of the person who has died. Not many people get to go in those rooms. And almost nobody gets to go in those rooms as many times as I get to go in those rooms, with as many varieties of family experiences and dynamics and personalities. And sometimes when someone dies, to use the line from William Butler Yeats, a terrible beauty is born. I did a wedding once in Lincoln Park, and I gave a business card to the photographer, because you never know when they might know someone else who needs someone for a wedding. And I got a call from her a couple of months later. She herself was looking to get married. And you would think, wonderful, mazel tov, right? In this case, her live-in partner of 15 plus years had just been diagnosed with a brain tumor. And it was aggressive cancer. They knew he wasn't going to make it. They had never planned to get married. They were never going to have kids. They'd been together for 15 years, shared a house, shared a life together. But he was going to die, and he wanted her to have property and Social Security and the things that he couldn't guarantee for her in life anymore, he wanted to give her after his death. And so I met them at their house. You don't need witnesses in the state of Illinois to get married. You just need an officiant, the two people getting married, the wedding license, and a working pen. That's all you need. And so we were in their living room. They took a Beatles record off the wall and played it on the LP player. They read some poems from books they had on their shelves. They had written original vows to each other. It was just the three of us, and it was beautiful and intimate. Fortunately, Jim was having a good day. He could get out of bed that day and do it in the living room. And then a month or two later, he was near the end. I visited them in the hospital, and then ultimately he died just before New Year's. And we did the funeral on New Year's Day at the Newberry Library, a beautiful setting. And at that funeral, we had people read the vows that they had written to each other, that no one had seen. It was just theirs, and now it was everyone's, because his life, to some extent, belonged to everyone now. And it was a terrible beauty. It was awful. It was heart-wrenching. And you felt the worst for Sandra, who had lost her love of her life. At one point, I said to her, trying to comfort her in my naivete, well, at least you had some months to say what you needed to say. And she looked at me and said, I had a lifetime of things I wanted to say. That was her reality. Now, it's an awful experience to see people go through this, but there's also something terribly beautiful about the process of saying goodbye in a way that's meaningful, that faces reality, that deals with life and not simply looking above and beyond to an afterlife or a next life or some other life. Now, this approach to death and mortality is very different from that of traditional religion. I want to read to you a traditional morning text. Those who know can probably recite it along with me. It's called the 23rd Psalm. You've seen it in movies, you've probably heard it before. But think about the approach to life and to death exemplified by this passage that's read at funerals in many, many traditions in the Christian world and also in Jewish funerals as well. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, I hear this at funerals. It doesn't provide comfort to me. But for those from a traditional religious perspective, this is articulating many of their beliefs about life and about death, and about how death affects how they approach life. For example, one of the core beliefs of a traditional approach to death is that miracles happen. Death can be averted. There was a new ebook released last month by Greta Christina, who is an online freelance writer, on humanist approaches to death, or atheist approaches to comforting people with death. And she mentions in that book a study that shows that more religious people are more likely to go for radical treatments at the end of life rather than accept the inevitability of death. Maybe they haven't thought about the fact that death is inevitable. They've thought it could always be averted. There'll be a miracle somehow, some way, and I've just got to stick around long enough. You know, if I can extend the movie another 5 minutes, maybe there'll be a happy ending somewhere in the plot twist. And death can be averted. I will fear no evil. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, no matter what. You also get the response sometimes of what I call disaster nearsightedness. When a plane crashes and half of the people die, and some of the people that live say, thank God I lived. Well, what about the other people? I had someone once call me and say, I have a cousin who had a recurrence of cancer. If I got you her Hebrew name, would you say some prayers to try and help her? Now, she obviously wasn't clear on my approach to life, but in the process of discussing it with her, I realized I had a better answer for her. I said, don't give me her Hebrew name. Give me her phone number, and I'll call her. I can send words up into the universe, and who knows if they'll land anywhere that would make a difference. But if I pick up the phone, and I call her, and I talk to her, I can help. I can help give her a more positive attitude, and we know positive attitude can have a positive impact on survival of medical situations. I can help her talk about her situation. I can commiserate with her. I can let her feel she's not alone. If it's a terminal situation, I can help her make best decisions for the time she has left, to feel more in charge of her life, even as her life is not her own anymore. I can do something tangible. I know it makes a difference. I'm not going to wait for a miracle. I'm not going to assume that death can be averted, because the humanistic approach is rather to say that death is inevitable. Sometimes Americans think that death is optional. But the reality is that death is inevitable. Every single person in this room will die. Everything that has lived will die. And we have to get used to that process of letting things go. It doesn't make the loss easier. You still feel the pain when they die, but you can get used to it a little bit faster. You see, when someone dies, you don't get over it. You get used to it. And you're reminded at special moments or at unusual moments that someone isn't there. You want to call them up to ask for a recipe, and they're not there anymore. It's their birthday. It's their anniversary. These dates that you've made your own personal calendar become a memorial calendar, as those people are not there anymore, but you still remember them on those special days. I once did a funeral for a woman. She was in her 30s again, dealing with cancer. She was someone who did not want to talk to me before the funeral. Sometimes terminal people want to talk to me. They want to tell me about their life and what they want in the funeral, and other people feel like I'm the angel of death. That if the rabbi shows up, then I'm done for, and I don't want to even see him. And that's fine. It's their life. It's their death process, too. But in this case, I did the funeral for this young woman, and several months later, her brother had a new baby, a baby girl. And they named that new baby after Angie, the woman who had died. Now, were there tears at that baby naming when I talked about Angie and what she meant to this family? Of course. But they were going to be there anyways. Death was a reality, and we weren't going to miss it by not talking about it. In fact, it created a positive meaning for that name going forward in the family. It's both loss and life. A second traditional value regarding death is the belief that death is not the end. There's a world to come. There's immortality or reincarnation. Death is not real. It's an illusion. The true part of you, your soul, your spirit, will live on. This is the traditional version. I don't need to go into great lengths to debunk that in this audience, at least. A humanist approach, on the contrary, says that death is final. And I try to make this point to people who say, well, I wish I believed in an afterlife. Or wouldn't it be more comforting to have an afterlife to believe in? I said to them, well, you're still not facing reality. The reality is that when someone dies, they are gone for the rest of your life. You will not get to talk to them or touch them or communicate with them for the rest of your life, whether or not you see them again. My approach is I don't think I'm going to see them again. But even if one was to, you've got 40 years left. You're not going to see them. Why not face the reality of death and, again, get used to it a little bit faster, a little bit more comfortably? Now, we know that accepting that life is final, death is final, makes this life more valuable. And we're allowed to say, if death is final, I feel cheated. You know, those 30-year-olds that were facing cancer, they felt angry. And that's okay. You don't need a personality to be angry. I bang my head on the car. I get mad at the car. It's not the car's fault. I still feel the emotion. I still get mad at the inanimate object. We can be angry at the universe, but we have to understand where that expression, where that emotion comes from, and how to redirect it to understand it, to frame it in a way that's productive. Now, traditional religion believes that the world is fair and makes sense. You often will praise God over and over again in these funeral orations. The Lord is my shepherd. In the traditional Jewish prayer for the dead, the Kaddish, it's praise God, praise God. It doesn't even say anything about the dead. It's all about God and how wonderful God is. Our approach is that the universe is indifferent to our suffering. Tragedies happen, crashes, trains, earthquakes, cancer. What is in our control is not whether we live or die, it's how we respond. Do we pursue medical treatment? Do we accept when medical treatment can't help anymore? Can we express caring and emotional connection in the face of an indifferent universe? Well, of course we can. Now, the last piece of a traditional approach to mortality that can have some positives for us is the approach of respect for the dead. Now, the traditional Jewish saying is that all dead men are pious. That is, you don't say anything bad about someone who died. You only say good things. I once went to meet with a family after the patriarch of the family had died, and I said, so tell me about your father, your grandfather. They said, he worked hard and he loved his family. And I said, okay, well, what was he like as a father? How involved was he? He worked hard and he loved his family. All right. Well, did he have any hobbies or interests? He worked hard and he loved his family. And I realized he was kind of a jerk. And they didn't want to say that to me because they thought I would say that to everybody at the funeral service. So what I will often do in that circumstance is I'll put down my notepad, put down my pen, I'll say, okay, this is off the record, tell me the truth. And in many cases, they don't know me, so it's hard to do that to someone you don't know, but you work on it. Sometimes it takes an hour or two to get them to open up, but you have to do it because you want the real story. I don't want to sit up there and say he was a wonderfully loving man when it was the exact opposite. That won't work for the family and the audience. It's not going to help process for him. So maybe you say, if he was very critical of them, he had very high standards. Well, that sounds good, but they know what I'm saying. The point is you have to deal with the reality, but also to do it in a way that respects the dead, that frames it in a nice light. That's to meet the emotional needs of the family, after all, because they don't want someone standing up there criticizing their father who just died. That's not what they're feeling in their heart. Maybe it is, but it's not what they want to express. It's not going to create a ceremony that meets their needs at that moment. When it comes to traditional mourning rituals, sometimes there are elements of psychological wisdom in them. And there's also elements of primordial fear. You know, if you mandate people to spend time with their family, if you've seen the movie This Is Where I Leave You, by the book by Jonathan Tropper, it describes a family being forced to live together for 7 days after the patriarch of the family has died. You can imagine being forced to live with your family again when you're adults for 7 days can be a little bit grating. So there's a problem with it. But also, it's good to spend time with people when you felt a loss. Sometimes you surround that hole with other loving feelings, and that helps to not fill it, but to compensate in some ways. In Jewish life, there's a tradition of marking the anniversary of a death. In Yiddish, the phrase is a yahrzeit, the year time. And it gives you a space in the calendar. Well, or I'm going to remember this person, I'm going to remember something wonderful about them. Maybe I'll light a candle, maybe I'll just drink a beer that they liked, or go to an event that they like to do something that reminds me of them. And creating that space in the calendar is a very useful psychological process to get used to the process of loss. Of course, some of the more strictly prescribed mourning rituals can be over the top and ridiculous, and that's where we have to offer our humanist editorial eye on choosing from our past what we choose to use. Now, our response to the dead is not to believe in an immortality, but is to believe in a kind of natural immortality. In the 1970s, there was a TV show called Donahue. Some of you may remember Donahue, at least I've read about it on Wikipedia. The Donahue show was a talk show where people would come and often say outrageous things. And one of the people who came on the show once was Madeleine Murray O'Hair, the founder of American Atheists. She was asked by Donahue, well, if you don't believe in an afterlife, what happens when you die? She said, you rot. Now, factually, that's true. What happens to your body? You decompose. We break down, we become part of the natural world. But doesn't it sound better to say we become part of the natural world than to say you rot? Isn't it more comforting to talk about how we live on in our family and the good deeds that we've done and the positive memories that we've made and the good impact we've made in the world around us? Yes, our molecules continue in other forms. But let's also think about how our personality can have an impact even beyond we are gone. The stone sinks in the water, but the ripples carry on for a long time. So when it comes time to offer a celebration at the end of life, we do try to use that phrase, that framing of a celebration of life. It's not unique to us, actually. Many liberal religious movements are trying to move in this direction. Instead of talking about God, they talk about life and the life of the person who has passed away. Make their life story the center of the service. And so most of my eulogy is actually a biography of the person who has died. I don't talk in general terms about life and meaning and purpose. I talk about John and what John was like and how John related to his family and what John did in the world and why everyone is here to celebrate the life of John. We also have to realize in doing humanist memorials that you have to balance the values and the needs of the living with the values of the deceased. Because it's rare that you'll find a family where everyone believes exactly the same thing in all the branches. I've had plenty of funerals where the parent was an atheist and the kids are believers, or the parent was a believer and the kids are atheists, or one kid's a believer and one kid's an atheist, and now we have to try and negotiate among these competing perspectives. And you have to try and find space so that each feels acknowledged and validated and has their needs met in a spirit of tolerance and just getting along. And sometimes, frankly, you wind up negotiating old family disputes that have nothing to do with the person who died, because they can't be in the same room together. But on some level, they know they need to be at this important moment in their life. This also implies making changes to tradition. In Jewish life, there's something called Shiva, which is after a death, you're supposed to stay in a family home for 7 days. In fact, the word Shiva comes from the word Sheva, which means 7. The problem is, of course, most people don't sit Shiva for 7 days anymore because it's far too, I don't want to say inconveniencing, but it's just too disruptive to their ordinary lives. And in many cases, with the prolonged death process, they're doing their Shiva time, their family time beforehand, as the person is going down slowly in hospice, in home care, gradually declining. They're seeing everyone all the time. They're exhausted. They have to get their life back together after a few days of mourning. And so often they'll do Shiva for a weekend or Shiva for a few days. It's changing. It is not 7 anymore, but that's fine. That's what religious traditions were made to do. They were made to be adapted to human needs because they were made for humans in the first place. Now, a third principle about our memorials is that we have to focus on both our needs at the moment and what we will need in the future. When someone has had a long decline, it can be very hard to get those last images of them on the dialyzer and on the respirator, covered in needles and tubes. It's hard to get that out of your mind. But what you need in the funeral is the beginning of the next process. You need to move toward what will be the lasting memories. I'll always remember that last picture of them in the hospital, on the deathbed. But that doesn't have to be the only picture that is prominent in my mind, and it doesn't have to be the only picture that's prominent at the funeral service. You need to look at the whole life, not just the end. And that's true in any circumstance. Tragic death at 30s. You have to acknowledge it at the beginning, but then talk about their life. Because we are more than what happens to us. We are more than what fate throws at us or cancer shows up in our genes. We are who we make ourselves to be. I had a member of my congregation who was in his 70s, was a wonderful, kind, and loving man. He had perfected the art of the vacation slideshow torture chamber. So he would, after every vacation, pick out the best slides he could make jokes about and submit his family to hours of slideshows. But he went in for a procedure in his early 70s and had a heart reaction to it, and then went on a gradual decline over the next 2 years, had significant cognitive decline. In the end, I didn't even visit him anymore because he didn't recognize anyone but his closest family. It was a very, very painful, draining process for the entire family. When he finally died, I knew that I had to get them past the last year or the last 2 years and past the anger of, why did he die now? 70 is young for dying these days. Look at the obituaries. It's 80s and 90s, almost always across the board. And plenty of hundreds, too. So when someone is vital and living in their early 70s, you figure they've got 10, 15 years, and then something gets them, and they're gone. And you have to find a way to say, this is going to happen. I know it. It's terrible. It's awful. I'm angry. But the 70 years he was here were wonderful and beautiful, and that's what I want to remember. So I have to help that shifting process. And the last point is that we have to acknowledge reality. Acknowledge the reality about the deceased and who they really were. Acknowledge the reality about the situation and how tragic it may be. But also acknowledge our own feelings. We're allowed to be angry, but we're also allowed to be relieved. If someone's been suffering for months, it's okay to feel good that they're gone, that they're not suffering anymore. Sometimes we're kinder to our pets than we are to our relatives because of the laws in this state. And it may be the case that someone dies and it's sad but not a tragedy because they lived a long and good life. They were in their 90s, they were loved by their family. I had one funeral, he was living on his own until 96 and then had passed away by 98, but had a loving family of grandchildren and great-grandchildren around him. And one of his sons said to me at the family meeting, he said, "Where can I sign up for that? I'll take what he got." It's not sad, it's a life fulfilled. And ideally, that's how we want to live every day. You see, what we learn from approaching mortality and death in a humanist way is not just how to deal with death, but how to address life. What will people say about you at the eulogy? What will your family say if someone comes to help arrange a service? That can help frame the choices that you make in your life. I want to conclude with a poem by Merritt Malloy. It's called simply Epitaph. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men who wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and I'm very open to any questions or comments or reactions. Please. Please. So the question was, do I see people from other traditions beyond either Jewish tradition or humanist tradition coming to me for services? Once in a while, but very, very rarely. I do occasionally hear at the end of a eulogy, boy, I want him to do my eulogy, but it's not, it doesn't come to pass most of the time. One of the interesting questions they've begun asking on surveys is you ask people, not are you secular or not, but do you predict that you will have a religious funeral or not? The American Religious Identity Survey of 2008 asked this question. They found about a quarter of the population said they don't predict that they themselves will have a religious funeral. But that could be because they know their kids are atheists and they won't give them one, or it could be because they themselves wouldn't ask for that for themselves. And I think that as time goes on, you'll get a lot of people from varying perspectives who will be coming together looking for this kind of a service, whether it's a community like this or this kind of a ceremonial need at the end of life. It's one of the reasons why the American Humanist Association sponsors something called the Humanist Society, which has officiants who are available to offer life cycle events, most often for weddings, but certainly for funerals as time goes on. That will be a more and more pressing need. So I am listed on that as well as in my Jewish capacity. I haven't had a lot of need for it, but I imagine it's available, and I'm certainly open for business. Yes, in the back, loudly, please. So the question was about how to do it as a community when you don't have a particular professional leader that's in place. I mean, I'm a fan of the professional leadership model, not only for my own self-interest, but also I find that it can work very well if you find the right people. It can go terribly wrong if you find the wrong people. We understand this. In terms of a community setting, there are a few things you can do. One is to create resource guides. This can be a committee project. My congregation has a home memorial service booklet, so sometimes I'll leave services at home, or sometimes I'll give it to the families and say, use this. I had one person who was doing an unveiling, which is about a year after the death. You unveil the tombstone at the cemetery, and I was able to email her a copy of this booklet and say, pick some readings out of here that might work. She said, I found one that's perfect, that's great. So having resource books is a very useful step. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel on this. I mean, there are a lot of books on humanist approaches to death that you can find in reference works and websites and so on. So I would start with at least a reading list or a starting point like that, a guidebook. The second is it may help to have a committee of what you would call ready responders. Because there's all kinds of things that happen when somebody dies that are logistical, not ceremonial. You know, if you're having a reception afterwards, who's going to make that arrangement? I mean, I'm dealing with the death certificate. I'm dealing with crying my eyes out every 5 minutes. Am I going to be planning a big event? Well, having a community that can step in to help with some of those logistical details will help. Even if you have, let's say, a reception immediately after the funeral service, who's going to be there to get the trays to set things up? Well, maybe someone from the community could do that kind of a logistical help, and it just takes a burden off the person who's dealing with the loss. The third asset is if you have members of the community who are trained in psychotherapy, counseling, social work, in those fields, who have at least some training in dealing with grief and the process of grief, they can be resources to talk to people. Now you have to find the right balance between professional responsibility, liability issues, and community responsibility, and asking people to volunteer what they're getting paid to do elsewhere can be problematic as well. But you want to draw on those kind of resources to find what's available. And the last point is, it may be the case that occasionally the community needs to refer outside to an expert. So for example, when we wanted to do web design for a new website, we didn't have anyone in the congregation who was a specialist in that, so we hired somebody from outside to work on that project because they were the best skilled person at doing it. And so it may be the case that occasionally when it comes to certain events, that outside people would be useful resources to have a list of. These are people who are sensitive to the needs of non-theists, who can create a meaningful event for you, and that might be a fruitful route to go. And then you obviously talk to those people to know they're on the list to make sure they're comfortable working with your community in an appropriate way, and not gouging them either. Any other comments or questions? Yes, please.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? Oh, the ebook?
I didn't memorize the title. If you look up Greta Christina, Greta, the last name is Christina, Christina. It's something about comforting thoughts on death, even if you're an atheist, or even without you don't have God, or something like that. But if you look up her name in an ebook, you'll find it's only available on ebook, but you'll be able to find it there. And I actually had a chance to skim it this morning. It's only about 60 pages long. It's a sort of mini ebook. And it's got some good thoughts in there. She could have referenced Epicurus and a few other places she got the ideas she's talking about. That's the academic in me. But in general, her thoughts are good. And the other thing that I'm hoping to remedy with my own book project working in the background is she talks about her own experience, which is wonderful to be open and honest about that, but doesn't have a lot of lived experience of I worked with this family on this process, or I saw this funeral in this setting, that would help sort of make real the ideas. Instead of just having a list of ideas, having real stories, I think, can make it a little bit more lively and vivid. But in general, I think it's a very useful book as a starting point for approaching these questions. The other reference I would recommend, and she also recommends in her book, is a website called Grief Beyond Belief. The Beyond Belief trademark model is often a euphemism for secular or non-theistic approaches. There's a book called Parenting Beyond Belief by Dale McGowan. There's the Foundation Beyond Belief that Dale started that does charitable work for non-theists, or using non-theistic charitable work rather. And Grief Beyond Belief was started, I think, a year or two ago as an online resource for people dealing with the grieving process. It has articles and references. I've written a couple of pieces on there as well. So that would be another resource to look at, is Grief Beyond Belief. Yes, please. Yes, the plan is to write a book. The trick is to get an agent to write a book. It's always the long-term process. But the plan is to write a book on what I've learned about life by dealing with funerals and death. and to tell some of the stories that I've included here. That's hopefully the process it becomes the kernel of a book talk down the line. Please.
Might be related to this question. What talk you gave us is some version available elsewhere? I think this is very closely related, but like I have PhD family members that I benefit from hearing what you just told us.
Well, some of the ideas are in the blog post that I put up on Grief Beyond Belief site. Is this being recorded now?
It is. It'll be on YouTube.
So it'll be on YouTube, and you'll be able to see it there. The wonders of technology. I do have it on email. I can email it to you. The one piece that I can't put on a website, but I can hand out to you or send by email is this home memorial service that the congregation does, simply because it includes copyrighted poetry, and you can't put up copyrighted poetry on a public website because it's a version of publishing it without permission. You have to pay royalties and so on. And so, but if it's for private ceremonial use, you can use it in that context. So I'm able to put it in the book, but not put it on a website. So I have some copies over there on the table, by the way, if you're interested. I have some business cards if anybody wants to contact me separately or ask any other questions. I'm also very happy to talk about humanistic Judaism and what I do when I'm not visiting Sunday Assembly, the other 364 days of the year. And again, I want to thank Ben for inviting me, and thank Sunday Assembly for being here. You're filling a very important need in the secular and humanist world, and thank you all for coming.
That was, I found that quite moving, and I thought advice I wish I'd have before several funerals that I have attended, and some that I've spoken at, and it's a little, not the easiest situation. Now is our time for a moment of reflection, a time of quiet to think about your week or your next week or the pizza that's coming soon. And so I'll give us 30 seconds just to chill out or meditate or whatever it is you're doing. Now is our time for announcements. Does anyone here have any announcements or things that's coming up? I have a few. First off is, of course, that if you came in a little bit after we had the announcement, we're going to be having pizza after the event for anybody who'd like to stick around and talk. Our next month, we will be meeting here at on January 25th, same time, same channel. And our speaker will be Kimberly Veal. She is from the African American Humanist Association. She also does work with the Black Free Thinkers. And, oh, I'm sorry, problem I don't usually have. Next month, we will be meeting here, January 25th, and our speaker will be Kimberly Veal. She is active with the African American Humanist Association and the Black Freethinkers, and I don't have the title for her talk yet, but she does a lot of talk in the intersection of social change and atheism and humanism and so forth. So we're looking forward to that. And I think that...
Coat drive.
What?
Coat drive.
Oh yes, and we are having our coat drive today, so if you have brought a coat, why don't we say there's some white chairs right directly behind us that we could leave those coats on. Don't leave your coat on the white chairs at this point. And now is the time in Sunday Assembly where we do one thing that the religious traditions have definitely started. We're going to meet our neighbors, and we're also going to be taking up a collection that helps fund Sunday Assembly. Benny here in the green shirt will be passing around the basket. We also have, I think, a credit card swiper if cash is not available. I know I never carry cash on me, so We've been a big convenience, and it does help us pay for the room that Segundo Ruiz charges, the donuts, the copying fees, and the occasional slice of pizza. So, well enjoyed by all. All right, please take a moment, stand up, greet your neighbors, tell them how glad you are the axial tilt of the Earth is about to shift back.
We're going to end on one last song here. How many of you know what Old Lang Syne means? Anybody? Old time's sake. Very good. This is a very old Scottish folk song. It was actually written first as a poem, then adapted to an even older folk song. And so if you look up the original lyrics to Old Lang Syne, you get very few words that you would understand. But we picked one of the translations. So since it's the last song, we're all getting up, and then we'll go. Can I ask everybody to stand and sing with us? This is the Christmas party, this is the holiday party, the Hanukkah party, the Festivus party, and New Year's as well. We have to include that. And the Solstice. Should all acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should all acquaintance be forgot in days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, for old lang syne. Should all acquaintance be forgot in days of old lang syne? But the seas between us have roared and swelled for old lang syne, for old lang syne, for old lang syne. The seas between us have roared and swelled since old lang syne. Thank you, everybody.